Hello, my name is Serge, and I'm going to read a book today. Today, the book is entitled To the Ramparts by Ralph Nader. I think we're going to do half-hour videos, and yeah, we'll do that. So, his hope was to unite. His hope was to show the Democrats the values shared by both the left and the right, and then show the way to defeat Trump. So, part one. How many pages was that? I did that in like 25 minutes. And that was like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pages. That's like 5 minutes a page. That's not that bad. 5 minutes a page times 300 is 1,500. 1,500 divided by... Anyways, it's a lot of hours, but we'll figure it out. All right. The Democrats squander their Obama victory. Let's look back at how the Democrats failed year after year to deliver the goods to the people. Without forgetting that the Democrats are superior to the Republicans in some key policy areas, here I will highlight their repeated fumbling of the ball on significant issues. Surrounding the deepening corporate state, for example, they largely let Credit Suisse off the hook for its willful law-breaking, which defrauded the IRS. I will describe policies in which the Democrats' activities and corporate funding were largely in line with the Republicans, such as Obama's willingness to ignore the Constitution and federal laws when it came to conducting armed forays into other countries. So these are the ones who we should say at least tolerate the labor unions. Without forgetting that Democrats are superior than Republicans in some key policy areas. That's what we can't let that go, or else we'd have to be forced to actually create an alternative. He wants us to keep us in the Democratic pen as much as possible, while at the same time sell a book by pointing out, because his brand is supposed to be actual truth. Nader couldn't, from what I can tell, he points out real history. He just doesn't contextualize it in a way that we can actually affect real change. The deepening corporate state. When did that start, though, Nader? We're going to have to talk about corporate personhood, which is very closely tied with all of our foreign policy decisions. You need American corporate apparatus before we conduct foreign imperial wars of aggression to let those corporations now overrun the rest of the world, like the Dutch East India Company and all the fucking toxic corporate empires of the past. It's the same fucking pattern. No one reinvents the wheel. Let's begin with an overview in which I look back at the first sobering setback the Democrats faced after Obama's triumph in 2008. By the 2010 elections, the first held after Obama became president, the Republicans were already turning the tide. There were large election losses in 2010 following a Republican gerrymandering coup, and the loss of the House of Representatives to John Boehner and Eric Cantor. Well, yeah, because Obama ran on an I think all the politicians who've won presidency since George Bush was president. Well, I guess we re-elected him in 2004, but they've all been referendums on the war, anti-war, this and that. 2004, I guess, was close enough to 9/11. People were still scared, and they could push that fear button, but Obama was definitely an anti-war president. There are these huge anti-war demonstrations. We've been trying to stop this imperial machine, the American empire. We haven't been able to. So that's why we have to go bigger. We have to actually start reinventing these systems. We have to bypass them. You can't. Bernie Sanders proved that. You can't do it through the Democratic Party. This is intellectually disingenuous for Nader to try to keep us within that pen. And that's also why the Republicans you don't have a coherent argument, Nader, if you try to maintain that Democrats are inherently better than Republicans when our whole argument is against them, because at one point we have to start condemning them as a system and a structure, not just mistakes. How can you get the same thing when I read Rand Paul and these other guys on the right? They'll list time and time again about how the Republican Party is too authoritarian, and it's too corrupt. And then they'll say, but we got to stay in it because you can't take those values and put them within a good system. But then also, this could hardly all be blamed on Obama's lackluster campaign support for Democratic candidates. The real culprit was that the two parties were vigorously dialing for the same commercial dollars to finance their campaigns. The resultant inhibitions and self-censorships brought the parties' real agendas closer together. Well, this goes back to my idea that we capped Congress at 435, which now, instead of one congressman representing 30,000 people, they represent 750,000 people, something like that, 700,000 people. But it's a factor of like 25. So the strangling and enfeebling of our democracy has happened ever since we did that capping of Congress, which happened right after we ran out of domestic territory and we started fighting our imperial wars of aggression beyond Spanish-American War. See, all of history, that's where he said at the very beginning, this isn't going to be a historical book. Yeah, because then you would get real context. He wants to create the argument as close to the truth as possible. The dance is to get as close to the truth as possible without pushing people outside the Democratic Party. And that seems to be the Ralph Nader brand. And that's where his logic is going to fail him. Where are we at? I can't talk too much. It seems as though the only way for Democrats to win would have been to fundamentally separate themselves from Republicans by shifting their sights from big donors to the less well-off general public. Directions that would have saved them then might be prescribed right now as an agenda to battle back against Trump. These are 8 initiatives that would allow Democrats to landslide the Republicans in any election. First of all, Nader, again, no offense, but why should we trust your judgment when it comes to elections? And second of all, there's some wisdom. There's some wisdom to business knowledge. There's some wisdom to the rich. There's a lot of rich people who don't believe in such inequality that they benefit from. One of them being what's his name? Warren Buffett. And I don't even think the man is a good man, but he's not necessarily attached to the inequality that he benefits from. So that's the trouble about creating a voting bloc of just disenfranchised is it's the same thing that suffers the creating a voting bloc of just the winners of society, just all the diehard Republican capitalists. You're losing out on wisdom. And what works in society is what works, wisdom, just iterations of what makes the system more peaceful, more efficient. And that takes everyone's input. So we need better systems, more open systems where everyone can input. We can take the business wisdom on the right, but then we can also have the social protections on the left. Because if we don't have that, we have increased crime and we have increased costs in society. Everything's just about efficiency. And that's where we get to authority. The more efficient system requires less authority. And that proves that an anarchist reading of history and of politics might be able to devolve the authoritarian path that we're on for socialistic and capitalistic left and right reasons. That's why this talking helps out. See, those types of ideas are good. Those are worth getting. In 2010, none of these initiatives, which many who speak for the public were advocating, were embraced by the Democrats. To begin immediately on my central theme, it was the failure to pick up on populist measures that led to a defamed Democratic Party being run over by Trump's pseudo-populist rhetoric. Here's what I think should be the central platforms of a recharged Democratic Party, apart from facilitative electoral reforms discussed later. Okay, so a recharged Democratic Party. So Nader apparently doesn't have the courage or the aptitude to create his own party. He wants to take the Democratic Party and recharge it by giving it real populist roots. But the problem with that is he also acknowledged that there's commercial dollars to finance their campaigns. Democratic candidates are beholden to this party apparatus, which I pointed out. He didn't point out that. They're representing a lot more people with a lot less resources. And so they're outgunned, and that's why they have to. But he pointed out, well, they do rely on corporate money. So by giving them a new platform, it's not like they don't have the right values. Supposedly. You can't. His argument is funny. Democrats have historically been the party of the values of the lower class people. And for some reason, Nader has to remind him of that. When we also acknowledge that the whole reason why we're picking them over the Republicans is they share our values, and it's just the system that keeps them trapped on this fucking fundraising schemes. And then he says electoral reform. He's going to get to that later. So that said, which is showing me this is going to be a bunch of bullshit. We're going to listen to it anyways. He might state some good points eloquently. First, resurrect the old Democratic Party's historic role in safeguarding the federal minimum wage and labor laws from Republican dissolution. It's astonishing that since the passing of Senator Ted Kennedy, there have been so few lawmakers campaigning to raise the minimum wage or even restore it to its previous levels. If the minimum wage of 50 years ago, $1.60 per hour, were adjusted for inflation, today it would amount for about $11 an hour. A long overdue minimum wage hike would pour tens of billions of dollars into job-producing consumer demand during the recession. It would end a decades-long windfall for employers who have been increasing prices and their own salaries while receiving many tax breaks and subsidies. To objections from the curled-lipped House Republican Eric Cantor before his primary defeat in 2014, I would say, you don't believe workers in your district should make as much as workers made 50 years ago when productivity was half what it is today, Eric? Half of that? Oh, is that why he's using 1968? Because it's 50 years ago, literally 50 years ago. That's interesting. Oh. Yeah, but that's the whole point. The old Democratic's historic role. If you're talking about old Democratic history, we got to talk about Chicago 1968. Because in my reading of history, where you have authority and power structures, that was a clear demonstration of what the Democratic Party is all about, is authority and power structure. And we violated that authority for as humanitarian reason as you can get, trying to end the Vietnam War, which was as unjust a war as you can get. But because the Democrat Party happened to be the party who proposed a federal, so he's given us a scrap, basically. This isn't going to do anything for us. And Ted Kennedy kind of has a history of being a piece of shit. So that's like 2 strikes, which only if you believed in the religion of being a Democrat would you fucking... This is like, it's the same rationale the Catholic Church tries to get you to excuse these priests, or excuse the church. I'm sorry we had a lot of priests being pedophiles, but we're the Catholic Church, you know. You were kind of like, it's like we're family. It's like, yeah, that's your uncle, but it's family. We don't got to put him in jail for what he did. Depends on what he did. It depends on what the Democrats did. 1968 Democratic Convention beating people in the streets for merely protesting war. The party should have been dead right then and there. Just like the Republican Party. If it's not dead after Trump, then I don't know, it's not even defensive. These things are dead. No one has to spend any more effort. Now that we have access to knowledge and information, these things will die under the weight of their own cynicism and hypocrisy. Because it's exhausting to defend them. It's exhausting for me to even point it out. This whole book is exhausting. We'll see. Anyways, fucking minimum wage. That's the reason why we should stick with the Democrats. Announce the filing of legislation that declares immediate drafting of all able-bodied and age-qualified children and grandchildren of all members of Congress, anytime branch. This is just silly. This is like fucking Trump saying, like, every legislation that we bring up, we have to get rid of too. This isn't logical. Let's just live in a fucking country where we wage wars only of defense and only of national importance to the point that we would all willingly go. But to do this, it just doesn't sound like it's going to happen. It doesn't get to the root of the issue, too. Besides forcing Congress, it doesn't seem like it's going to happen. This is grandstanding. Besides forcing Congress to pay attention to its constitutional war declaring and funding responsibilities, this legislation would hold our humble public servants accountable by making them share the risk presently foisted on a few million, mostly low-income families. It's true. And we were low-income when I joined the military too, but there's congressmen whose children serve. There's exceptions to this rule that you're talking about. Third, cut the huge, bloated, wasteful military budget. Really end the endless boomerang wars with astute diplomacy and channel the expected savings into repairing and renovating America through a national public works program with good-paying, non-exportable jobs. Doable, but you have to actually address what we're talking about. We're talking about an American empire with hundreds of bases around the world. What did he say we were going to do it with? Astute diplomacy. We're going to end it. Has any empire in the history of the world ended through astute diplomacy? No, we're going to actually have to restructure the framework of our society to the point that it's going to be fucking borderline civil war? What if we can't contain these militaristic factions? What if we can't fucking subvert the police state and the secret paramilitary police, all the three-letter agencies we have? What if we can't subvert them to democratic rule? What if they think that the American empire can continue? Can we contain a rogue CIA, rogue FBI, rogue fucking NSA? Are they already rogue? How many people are in the executive branch of government? How many fucking tens of thousands? Something like 18,000, 20,000 people, all beholden to one person, the president, and the fucking intelligence agencies. Who's in charge? The State Department, the president, the intelligence agencies? Is there such thing as a deep state? How many people are working? How many interests are there? Astute diplomacy. No, I think the survival of the world depends on unwinding the American empire, but it's going to be a complicated fucking bitch of a move. And it's risky even to bring up this conversation. He's laughable. It's like these people that you look at all your life, like you trusted they were on top of the situation. Then when you look into it, you're like, you've just fucking been avoiding the hard questions your whole life, haven't you? So we have minimum wage, draft Congress, and fucking astute diplomacy. Fourth, among other popular tax reforms, shift much of the tax burden onto activities that Americans do not like, such as pollution, huge Wall Street speculation, corporate crime waves, and profits from systemic product waste. Even ExxonMobil supports the idea of a carbon tax, which would help the environment. The motto, tax what you burn before you tax what you earn. That's kind of like the same logic as like voting for Democrats, right? Like the lesser of two evils. Even ExxonMobil, isn't that a reason to question it? If you tell me ExxonMobil supports something and they consistently are just asshole fucking corporate members of society, then let's see how they benefit from a carbon tax. Let's make sure that we're not setting up a system by which the perpetrators are going to benefit. I haven't really looked into it. I heard pro and con. We'd have to look into it. Fucking from the logic that Nader uses so far, I don't just trust him. Even ExxonMobil. You can't demonize and vilify a whole group of people and then use one of them to prove your examples without raising a question on my mind. Logical coherence, Nader, please. Fifth, announce a national energy conversion campaign based on efficiency and renewables. The only true energy independence comes from the sun in its many manifestations. Shifting America's energy policy will create more local employment and small business down to the community neighborhood level. Goodbye to the planet-destroying toxic fossil fuel and fearful atomic energy cartels. That's the thing, is these things are complicated topics and you need to speak it. Like, I'm speaking kind of passionately, emotionally in these videos, but Nader, what's the alternative is slow down and speak with dispassion. Write with dispassion too. He writes with passion for being someone who's so vested so long in this. Fearful atomic energy cartels. They're just not sustainable. From what I could tell about atomic energy, it's not supported by the private market without government guarantees because the risks are too great. And that shows you right then and there. We haven't figured out how to deal with the toxic waste to the point, from what I can tell. And I might be wrong. I'm open to it because it's an interesting idea. But if you really believe in markets and logic, and that's where anarchism and putting things on a spectrum between authority and fucking open systems, and perhaps everything is a case-by-case basis. Some things require a lot more authority to enforce, maybe protection of the commons, which requires some authority, or else that's the fucking, the tragedy of the commons, is we have to enforce protecting society somehow. But the more authority we use, the more inefficient it becomes, is the given theory. So that's what it is. It's just fucking, it might take too much energy for atomic energy. But anyways, he's not speaking to us that. His logic requires a lot of calling to American mythology, political mythology, when he uses the founding fathers and hearkening back to an age in which Democrats were good. It's slippery. It amazes me that someone who could be in politics this long, when you actually analyze what they're saying, it relies on such bullshit. Anyways, so what do you say? Energy independence is good, so that's a good one. Sixth, crack down on corporate and governmental violations of our Constitution and laws. No more no-fault government and no more no-fault big business. If the law is to be observed in the streets, then it must be observed in the suites. Clever, Ralph Nader. People are being pushed around, disrespected, defrauded, injured, and given the runaround by arrogant corporate bureaucrats using nameless, robotic, and tyrannical fine print contract barricades. There have to be accountabilities that the abused citizens can invoke in addition to directives through tort law civil actions. So this is his bread and butter. Ralph Nader was a consumer advocate first and foremost. So this is the stuff I would take him on, take his word at, because this is good. And that's what it is too. A lot of ego when you're younger, and as I get older, and as I go on this path, trying to learn to take the good, leave the bad. The reason why I vocalize the emotions is because I do believe that emotions have an intelligence to them. You have to unpack it though. So some of it's projection, but some of it is a defense mechanism where your mind is protecting you from bullshit, which rationally you can't catch up with, but your emotions are like, no, bullshit. And so I let it ride because there's some good thoughts at the end of a rant, but you have to acknowledge it for what it is. It's a rant. And at one point, maybe the notes on this is I would like to write dispassionately and put bullet lists of what I actually believe in and take out all the emotional shit. But, so yeah, no, number 6 is good. No more no fault government. Well, it depends on how big you want to grow the government. So that's what with the efficiency and the anarchist ideas is that we want protection by arrogant corporate bureaucrats, and we want accountability for the abused citizens, but we don't want to create such tort reform to the sense that that's what it is you got to inspect both sides. Being in insurance kind of showed me that too. Because there's bullshit when they say, oh, people are suing these fucking fraudulent lawsuits. We need tort reform in order to stop these lawyers from filing all these frivolous lawsuits. But if you look into them, some of them aren't frivolous. Some of them are real damages that are just being, like that lady they say who spilled fucking McDonald's coffee on her lap. And she burned herself. She actually needed to get skin grafts or something. She was an old lady and she burned herself pretty bad. And the money she got from McDonald's is barely enough to cover everything. But if you look on the news, the lady spilled herself with hot coffee, sues McDonald's, it looks bad. So, but that just comes with problem solving, emotional stability. Take the information and try not to make a judgment until you at least have multiple sides to it in order to establish some reference points. But I'm with you there. Tort reform sounds good. 7th is a proposal to establish a public national complaint handling system using the internet to help consumers, taxpayers, and workers for a change. I like this idea too. New York started the 311 system under Bloomberg. It's like, that's why you can't demonize these guys. Bloomberg's a piece of shit. Meant in the way that's not demonizing at all. I just don't like him as a human being. He helped coordinate with the fusion centers and other mayors in other cities and the federal government under Obama, the crackdown in Occupy Wall Street. So he was the guy who told the NYPD to kick my ass. So I don't like him because as a human being, I suffered harm at his hands. And so, but that's just a personal man-to-man. I don't like him. He's a piece of shit human being. As far as being an effective businessman, the 311 in New York was really effective at having a number that everyone could call in order to get city services. And then the 311 app now too. Some of the other stuff. People aren't 100% bullshit. But in certain ways that fucking Michael Bloomberg acts and conducts himself as a man, I have no respect for. But that's just between me and the dude. You've got a beef with your incommunicado insurance company, bank, energy company, pension fund, cable company, hospital, telephone, gas, water, electricity, or some government agency you can't even get through to file your complaint, then refer to the national system. Think of the reductions in dread and anxiety levels for millions of families. But see, the best parts of Nader, the worst parts of him, I protect myself from through my anti-authoritarian stance, which also fucking is sensitive to the democratic bullshit. The best parts of Nader, the parts that I actually want to keep, which are the last two so far, tort reform and this national hotline for complaints, would coincide with an open source fucking party. Is we're trying to get as much information into the system as possible and then sort it in an appropriate way. So that's when you know you have the truth, the greater reality set, is when you incorporate the best of your opposition's arguments while not admitting any of their faults and logic. I think that's where I have Nader, and that's how we're going to try to read this. Incorporate the good within our larger framework, our values. And he doesn't really have any values, really. He just preaches loyalty to authority. In this case, the Democratic Party as the authority And his only justification so far has been because historically they've been the lesser of two evils. While he leaves out a lot of history. Come on, Ralph, come on. Who do you think I am? 7th is a proposal to, I already did this, complaint system. 8th creates a democracy movement based on simple facilities for people who choose to band together in various roles. In return for what you, taxpayers and consumers, have had to spend to bail out and otherwise pay these large companies, the Democratic Party should press for inserts in their billing systems and those of corporate carriers, inviting you to voluntarily join and contribute dues to a nonprofit of your choosing, staffed with full-time champions who are directly accountable to you. No results, then no dues next time, and no taxpayer subsidies. These facilities would shift some institutional power from the haves to the have-nots. This idea is working in Illinois for residential utility consumers through the nonprofit group Citizens Utility Board. So that's an interesting idea. Again, that would be something that I would take in my open source political party. Because you're matriculating information from the ground up at the most grassroots way possible. What I would be wary about putting a guy like Nader in charge of the execution planning on something like this is his authoritarian bent. Even though he runs as an independent, this and that, already his desire to corral us into the Democratic Party and to support the lesser of two evils tells me that he's a little ignorant, just like when Bernie Sanders talks about free education for all. You're not going to question the whole higher education apparatus, though. There's something really rotten with that whole education market, from the way that the government guarantees all the loans, allowing them to have crazy inflationary prices because there's no checks, because it's not an open market with supply and demand, because the government has its fingers on the scale, to the way that we have these ivory towers that don't talk with each other, and the paper system for the research. You're promoted through writing bullshit papers, which now even algorithms can write. No one reads all the papers. All the information is getting lost in these information silos. But so guaranteed tuition for all that's like putting sugar on a fucking anthill. You have ants in the first place. That's what we have. We need politicians and leaders of the mold I'm trying to become, who address structural change and systemic problems, because we have better, like this tool right here, we have better tools for conversation in which we can actually have deeper discussions and dialogue. You can pull up these videos whenever you want. So there's no excuse now to not start having these deeper discussions and dialogue. It's kind of ironic that homeless Shaz is the first to start. But so I like this idea, Citizens Utility Board. I distrust you as the type of person to run it unless you prove to me that you subscribe to open source anarchistic ethics, which would oppose any type of authoritarian inertia inherent in any bureaucracy. Every bureaucracy eventually starts seeking power for itself. A lot of the things you propose, Nader, would be solved through an anarchistic open source ethic, which you're afraid to go off the reservation, though, aren't you? And then I find later on, too, he also subscribes to more decentralized authority, less authority. It's like, why don't you come out and he flirts with anarchy a lot. He almost wants to come out of the closet. Nader is like, I'm not going to be crude or crass. Come on, Shaz. I bring up these proposals to open the book because, as we'll see, it was Obama's and the Democrats' failure to push forward such proposals, empowering the general populace and giving them more of a voice in their own government, that contributed to many voters' indifference to this party's later attempts to get out the anti-Trump votes. Yeah, it was, but it goes deeper, Ralph Nader. It goes deeper. This was just a straw that broke the camel's back. But it's really interesting looking at politics in America. This is the deception that I've been through, being born in 1982, turning 18 in 2000. So my first president was Bush. I never vote. I'm not that stupid. So I saw Bush coming a mile away. He's a fucking dumbass. I saw Obama coming a mile away because by 2008 I'd been in the military. I'd studied some in college, and that was bullshit. And then I read on my own, and I contextualized history on my own. But it took a lot of effort to do it. And yeah. I think we're going to end this video. We're going to pick up on the next one, chapter 1. But this is good. I'm starting to see where I differ from his opinion through this off the top of the head speaking. Hopefully we can tolerate more videos. It's helpful, at least for me. And if you could reach one person.